Hi, my name is Lael McDill, and I'm a polymer clay artist. I work in the technique of millefiori, and I am going to teach you today how to make a feather cane that looks kind of like a peacock feather. It's sort of a whimsical peacock feather. Working down here, I'm going to put my camera down so you can see my workspace. So, I've got my colors laid out here, ready to go. And as you can see, I've sort of got a range of colors chosen for my feather. These will be the center of the feather, so it's kind of going from light to dark and smaller to larger. And then I've got some colors here for what I would call my fluffiness part. So with the fluffiness, first of all, we're going to make each one of these colors into a worm that's, say about 3 to 4 inches long. All right, and you know, I like an imperfect worm. You see how that worm is kind of lumpy and bumpy? That's good. So we're going to do that with each one of these colors. And all that really matters is that they're the same length as each other. So each one is about the same length, maybe not the same thickness, but that's okay. So you can see how those are all pretty close to the same. And my last color here, there we go. My 4 colors. Now what I'm going to do is smash those down just with my fingers because I don't want them to be too perfect. You could use a rolling pin, that would be fine, but fingers are great for making things look a little more natural. You can pick it up and pinch it like this, get it all nice and flat. And going for whiter, a little whiter than it is, and than it was. And you'll notice each color might be a little bit different in softness, and that will cause a little bit different length. So see how my one is a little bit shorter? I could lengthen that out, or if you've got one that's like a lot longer, a lot of times I'll just fold that over, and that also adds to the variety. So that's not a bad thing. Now I'm going to take these and stair stick them. That is the trick with fluffiness. See how I can still see the other color underneath? And when I flip it over, I still see the other color underneath? Oh, by the way, see that little extra bit of a color in there? That's fine. I don't really care about that. Adds to the variety. I'm stair stacking, and I'm actually changing my mind here. If I put those two right next to each other, they're pretty close to the same in tone. So I'm going to put that one down on the bottom, and that'll add a little more variety. So you can see how it's a slanty pile. So it's got all the colors in it, and they don't lay right on top of each other. They lay off to the side, so it makes sort of a slanted pile. I'm going to stretch that a little, but not much, just mostly kind of pinching it together. Then I'm going to cut right in the center, and I'm going to pick it up and drive it over. So I'll repeat that because there are so many ways to do this differently, like flopping, flipping, turning, all that. But really, the way to do it is to go straight from where you cut it, pick it up, slide it over, exactly on top this time. No more stair stacking, exactly on top. Now, if one side is a little shorter, just give it a little tug. So I've got, well, it's getting shorter because I cut it in half, but that means I'm going to stretch it again. So each time I'm giving it a good little stretch, and I'm flattening it a bit, but I'm not flattening it tremendously. I don't want it to get wider. So I'm going to cut in half again, pick it up and drive it over, and pull that shorter one a little bit, and stretch it each time. So we wanted to repeat this 4 times, 5 times isn't a problem. So that was 2. Every time I am stretching and putting it together. So stretch it to fit, give it a good stretch like that. And now if it's getting really thick, sometimes they start to get super tall. That means you need to flatten it more. If it's getting really wide, pinching it this way will get it less wide. Okay? So it's a little bit of a trick to learn that exact sort of motion of that stretching. Okay, so 4th time together, and that's going to be enough, but I'm going to stretch it a bit more and flatten it a bit more. So it gets to be maybe about 3-4 inches. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside and move on to my colors that I've got chosen here with the lights to darks and small to large. I'm going to start with the small one. I really don't care if those little bits and pieces in there. I think they look cool. So they might not even show, but if they do, they look cool. So I'm making a very short little worm. It's very short, very stubby. Now I am going to want to put a little dent right in this little spot. So to do that, you can use a toothpick. So let me grab a toothpick. So you just, or like depending on how big you're working, if you're working with larger chunks of clay, you might want a dowel or a skewer. But see, I'm pressing that in there. All right, and then I'm going to take my next darkest color, and that one I'm going to pinch off enough to make a little worm that rolls right in that little slot that I made. Now sometimes if this second color is a lot harder, you don't even need to make that dent because it'll dent in there automatically. So got that in there, and I'm going to roll it a little bit smoother, but I don't want it to get tremendously long, just a little roll. Okay, then this color becomes a blanket all the way around this guy, which means flattening that out and making it about as wide as the worm, so sort of matching that up. And as long as it tucks all the way around, then you got it. So I'm starting right at that little edge there and wrapping all the way around, and if it's not quite long enough, I pull it. If it's too long, it's okay. Over wrapping is fine. Okay, so each time, make sure it doesn't get long. As you smooth it, don't let it get longer. So see how I'm doing that to kind of shorten it up? Now the next color, I'm going to put that one on. The reason you have more and more is because you want it to be thicker. So this one, actually these two are about equal in amount, which is fine. If you have equal amounts, then the last one will look a little bit more like a line, like an outline. All depends on the look you're looking for, and sometimes it's better to just wait and see what you get. So next thing is another blanket. Now, when I put this one on, I'm going to pinch this edge, make it a little bit thinner. So what I'm going for is, I'm starting where I put that little dot, the worm that I put in as a little dent, starting there and going around, and I'm seeing that I want it to just barely match up this time. I want it to be thinner. I want this side to be thinner and this side to be thicker. So flattening and matching it up, and if it's too long, because you don't want to overwrap, because you want to keep this thin, I can trim it a little bit so that it doesn't overwrap, and it'll match right up, or just barely reach. It's okay if it doesn't. So that makes for a little thicker roll there, and thinner down on the bottom. Okay. So I'm going to put on the last one, which you could do the same, especially if you have a really big piece. You could do the same where you make the thinner and thicker, or just make it pretty even. Just make it all kind of flat. Since mine were equal amounts, I'm thinking it's going to look more like an outline, so the different thicknesses is totally not going to matter. So I'm making a pretty thin sheet here. You can see how thin it is. And I'm going to wrap right around. Now it's over, like there's a little edge there. I could trim that. But I also find that if I stretch it a little bit, that will actually make it more the right size. And I am going to go for a line rather than anything thicker. So that means I'm going to trim it so that it matches right up. There we go. So I'm going to roll it just a little. And I've got my center of my sort of peacock feather. Now, I think I'm pretty lucky here because I actually ended up with exactly what I needed, pretty much. I want twice as much of this purple or this fluffiness as I have of my polka dot. So this is pretty darn close. If I cut this fluffiness in half, it's going to match up pretty nice. So that's what I want. Pretty even like that. All right. Now, I want to make this these fluffiness sort of curve around this rather than just smash them together, because I'll lose my circle unless this is much harder than this. So I'm going to pinch this one corner. So see what I'm doing? Pinching one color all the way down the line. And that's going to make sort of like a little cove for your circle to sit in. Now, a lot of times when you pinch that, your fluffiness will get longer than your polka dot. So you can always make your polka dot a little bit longer. So I'm going for putting the dot, so the thinnest part facing down towards that little point, the sort of curved round part. And I'm doing the same thing with the other side, being conscious of which color it was you pinched last time. I'm pinching the lighter turquoise, and I'm stretching it a little bit so it matches up. And I'm going to match up side to side, end to end right there, and then curving it around like that. Now, if I was going to stretch this a lot, I might get a little distortion of my circular part because I haven't really formed much on the top. I'm kind of leaving it a little bit a shape. So I'm just gently stretching it just to get a little bit longer. Now, I would probably slice off the ends, and then you can see what I got. Well, I'm a little off to the side, which is not a bad thing, but I could adjust that. Let's see what happened here on this side. A little bit offside, but I think it's going to be fine. I mean, for the things that I'm doing with it, it's going to be, you know, and it's organic, right? You don't need it to be totally perfect. If you were like, oh, I really want that to be more straight, you could take off your pieces and curve it a little bit over. A lot of times those polka dots will move around, so I think it looks fine. So now I'm ready to slice it all up and make whatever I want. You can also point it and form it however you want to too. So there you go. That's how you make a feather cane that looks like a peacock feather.